Institutions Committee. It is Wednesday, February 26th. And at 11 o'clock, our legal counsel came in and walked you through H 176 and H 219, the work crew bill, as well as the kids apart. We have testimony this afternoon to go through H 219. But what came out of Ben's presentation? Thoughts, questions?
So one of the things we did go through is a witness list, and we just added somebody. And Phil had said some of them are already scheduled, which is to hear from DOC, state's attorneys and sheriffs, the judiciary, Judge Jonay or
Which bill is this?
176, Defender General, and then we just talked about Mr. Griffin, who has experience running them.
That's great, having Tom.
What's his first name? What's his first name?
Tom.
Tom. And I'll get his contact if you don't have.
I've got his
Oh,
number
you do too?
if you
Okay.
need it.
And I just wrote, oh yeah, we wrote down what is a day, but we had that conversation that it's Brian got us that information of what a day is. Is it like 6 hours or 8 hours, but it's based on a contract. So because we're like, well, if it shows up for 4 hours, that counts as a day versus somewhere else at 6 hours. Turns out it could be based on a contract. So that was one of our biggest questions. So other people.
I think to me, it seemed kind of bare bones, the bill, and really more interesting to me is the sidebar that we couldn't really have, it seems. Maybe there's a difference of opinion for the judiciary and DOC on this program. I mean, what we couldn't talk about with legal counsel is the part that's most interesting to me.
Right.
Which is the difference in terms of DOC's really concerned with the program and judiciary wishes it was up and running like it was before.
That is my impression, and I'd be happy to talk more about that with either of them.
That's the rub.
Yeah.
That's what's going on.
And that was our biggest.
And the
question.
judiciary being the courts, being the judge or the state's attorneys.
Just wanting to deal with full facilities and a backlog of people and trying to deal with offenders efficiently.
So that's a bigger issue than just the work crew.
That's true.
Was how work crew fits into that, right? So. You want this, by the way?
Yeah, you do. I think it's more state's attorneys and then.
Yeah.
And then. judge.
But no, that was one of our biggest questions because obviously it just seemed like there was a disconnect between the two. And obviously then it's not policy, so at least a few of us want to hear more from those entities and how they perceive this. And then we can make a better decision on how we want to move forward. But we couldn't really get into it with Ben because it's not his purview.
Okay. So 176, anything came up from Ben's walkthrough at all? That was the kids apart because we've got the players in the room.
Or 219.
219.
Yeah, 219 is.
219.
I think we discussed the question of scope, that this is
Right.
just looking at a pilot program that's only good until 28, and then we have to decide whether it's going to stay sunsetted or not.
We explained what that meant, that rather than being typical of putting this in and then having us come back if it didn't work and saying we're gonna have legislation to remove it, then it was written this way so that we have to be proactive and say it's working, we're gonna go and we're gonna authorize it on a more permanent level or basis.
We just, I asked the question and might just want to sort through if the money isn't there on the appropriate side. Are we still expecting them to do this work and eat another part of the budget? I think it should be contingent on the funding.
Yeah, because the funding is only for one fiscal year.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Where does it say for 2028?
At the very
I think
end.
there's a sunset clause at the end.
There's sunset clause.
On the very back?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, it's
Yes.
okay.
and we had talked about how, as Ben had informed everybody that we can't bind the future legislature, but we can have them, we can authorize this program saying, you know, you, DOC in this case, you have to, work this into your base in how you pay for it, what it costs is, you know, you come to us with it. But we're telling you we want this program
Mhm.
for
So-
future.
So the 400,000 is for 1 year.
Yep.
And part of that 400,000, from what I'm understanding, is some of that is gonna go towards the Chittenden facility, the Kids Apart and Chittenden facility, and then the remainder of that, which is like 300,000, is going to go to set up the program in Newport, at the Newport Correctional Facility. That's my high-level understanding.
Mhm.
So
I would
we'll,
imagine our guests from
Kids
London
Apart.
would have that detail.
Yeah.
I know we've heard it before.
So, having said that, should DOC go first or should the Kids Apart folks go first? DOC? Go first, I guess.
Sure.
So I think it's you, Commissioner, isn't it?
Really stepping up.
Or is it Haley that's stepping up?
Yeah.
Haley, you're gonna be in the hot seat? Wow,
At least you can admit it.
Yeah.
is this a first for you?
I think in the hot seat, yeah.
Sharpen those knives.
Yeah, you're always kind of this voice back there.
These chairs are much more comfortable.
It's a different perspective.
Yeah.
Being up there. So Haley, why don't you weigh in on H219 for the department in terms of how the department sees this rolling out for the first year? So money will only be
Mhm.
really for FY26. And then we'll go from there. And then please identify yourself for the record.
For
Know
the
the drill.
For the record, Haley Summer, Director of Communications for DOC. Before I get started, just want to thank our partners from Lund for being in the room and for all the work that they do for justice involved mothers in Vermont. The program is incredibly valuable to the women that utilize it. With regards to the bill, so I think it was last year in H876, you all stood up a family-friendly visitation advisory study committee to submit a report about the feasibility of expanding family-friendly visitation kind of system-wide. And so we work closely with Lund and our other partners in the group to kind of assess what that would look like, what feasibility looks like in terms of staff capacity, space capacity. And the group did determine that the most feasible site to do some sort of pilot expansion in a men's facility would be Northern State. And that's for a couple reasons, partially due to its size, both population and the physical infrastructure. And the size of the visitation room there is actually significantly larger than some of the other facilities around the state. Majority of the men at Northern are also sentenced individuals, whereas some of the smaller, more regional facilities have a more transient detainee population. So they likely wouldn't be able to utilize the services in the same way. So recognizing this, last December, we went to Northern State to survey some of the men who live there. We worked closely with Kids Apart to develop some survey questions, kind of seeking to understand how many fathers were in the facility, what types of relationships that they had with their children, and what types of supports that they might be seeking from an expanded pilot program like this. Majority of the men who responded to the survey identified a couple of areas for potential supports. Some of that had to do with transportation and some of it also to do with education about parenting while incarcerated and staying in touch with their kids. So that was a really important baseline to kind of understand what services that they would be looking for, because obviously the needs of male parents will be different than the needs of female parents. So all that's to say, I'm certainly in support of expanding Kids Apart and agree with the committees or Representative Peter's ideas that Northern State would be the most feasible site to do this in. And happy to answer any questions that you all have related to the operations of this or the study committee or anything else.
What percent of the survey responded?
Yeah. So on the day of the survey, there were 414 men who were living at Northern State and 115 people responded. We tried to make clear that Obviously, it was only for men who identified as parents because it was specifically about visitation. And so of the 115, 98 said that they either had biological or adopted children. And that was specifically minor children, because I think Kids Apart serves children who are ages 0 to 18.
So 150 responded,
115.
Yeah.
115.
Mhm.
98 were identified
Yes.
themselves as parents.
Yeah.
So I just have a question. What was the transportation piece? Was it having families come up to the facilities? Was that? the
Yeah.
concern?
Yeah, I think it was about 70 or 80 of the respondents had said that like a primary barrier to their children visiting them was just the lack of individuals to bring their children to the facility. Or sorry, 55 said that the distance was one of the larger issues, and then 35 said lack of reliable transportation.
Right?
I mean, it's an obvious follow-on, but is that something that we assist with the women? No.
We provide gas cards.
Okay,
You just identify yourself for the record.
I'm Jessica Kell. I'm the Kids Apart Parenting Program Coordinator. So the grant that we currently have allocates funds for gas cards. For single families.
So the thinking is that in order to address the barriers of the family getting there, that under a pilot program,
Mhm.
this is what the bill does, it only sets up a pilot program for Newport.
Mhm.
Because the program's already existing in Chittenden, correct? I want to be real clear about that, because I want to make sure the language is clear about that too. That for the pilot for the male facility, the intent is that there would be gas cards as well.
Kim LaRoche, Parent-Child Center Services Director at Lund. That is included in the programmatic expenses for this pilot is gas cards as well as hotel. We accommodate depending on the distance. If a barrier is 3 hours of travel both ways, we have provided hotel accommodations to allow the child and caregiver to come the night before, so they're available for the morning start time of the visit. So part of that expense of the program is gas cards and hotel coaching.
Let me get into that more. Anything else for Haley? The DOC. Does DOC see this as, are you gonna need to do any changes in your visiting room or operations?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that the visiting room at Northern is probably most equipped for a program like this just because of its size. So I don't know whether the visiting room itself might need some like physical changes to it. It actually already has like a nice mural in there with a lot of different animals. So it's kind of friendlier to kids than maybe some of the other visiting rooms around the state. But certainly would have to consider operations as it relates to staffing, because the program, like Chittenden, might include some sort of separate visiting hours for children outside of what's already offered, and that would pull staff offline. So I think that the facility would just have to accommodate for that and what that would look like, because all of our facilities are short-staffed.
Well, that was gonna be my question to follow up, I guess, does it have to be divided or since you're just saying like it's separate hours? Obviously, I would assume this program doesn't take place when the visitation facility is full of other people. Right?
Yeah, yes. So separate hours, I mean, it would be something that we would probably work closely with our partners on to see what works best. Separate hours would probably be helpful. One of the things also to note, I know that at Northern specifically, they are utilizing the visiting room for other functions like remote court, which is sucking up a lot of time. And so that would also be something to consider when it relates to what hours we would be able to host that program in.
this is it's down the same facilities line, but when I visited the CRCF, there was actually a separate room where, you know, people could be in contact and not have the dividers, like, is there that separate kind of space at this facility?
Northern, so off of the visiting room, there is like a kind of smaller room where there are some programs that are facilitated there, some like volunteer run services. So I think that would, yeah, certainly be something that we could explore with our partners.
Yeah, the space that's being utilized at Chittenden is a wonderful space designated for kids apart. However, when we were at Northwest State Correctional Facility and at the Dale Correctional Facility, we used the regular visiting room and used either a closet or cabinets to store program supplies.
One of the things, so the visiting room in Chittenden is quite small, so there's not a lot of ability to like move tables around. Whereas Northern, because it is larger, you can kind of move some of the like barriers to the edges of the room and bring some chairs to the middle, so there's less division between parents and kids theoretically.
So I want to go to page 3 for folks. Here's the bill. You got to look at the language of the bill, folks. What page 3, line 12 is doing is codifying this program in statute. And it would be the responsibility of the commissioner to include funding to provide and sustain trauma-informed family support services and programming pursuant to section 128 of Title 28 in the department's budget proposal. So it's requiring DOC to submit the ongoing cost of this in their yearly budget.
Mhm.
Is that problematic for DOC? And your commissioner just left.
That was tough timing.
Purpose.
Certainly something we could explore. I know with regards to the 400,000 that would be appropriated through the bill for fiscal year 26. It's not in the governor's recommended budget this year, so it's not something that we could formally endorse. But certainly as we kind of come to the table every summer and start talking about what budget proposals that we want to submit to the governor's office, we could talk about it. I do know if our deputy commissioner, Kristen Calver, were here, she would talk about many of the budget strains that we currently have. And so there's not a lot of money kind of floating around that we could grab at for this.
Because I think that's an issue we're gonna have to discuss in the committee, because we're putting it in statute.
Mhm.
But this would be included in the governor's recommend.
Mhm.
So I don't know where the committee stands on that, but
We're technically just putting the pilot program into statute.
no, not this part, it isn't.
Well, that's where the appeal comes.
Folks, you gotta read the law, you gotta read the language, folks. Page 3, line 12. 28 VSA 102C is amended to read, these are the responsibilities of the
Mhm.
commissioner. And there's a new section 24 that would be added. That would, the commissioner would need to include funding to sufficiently provide and sustain trauma-informed pursuant to what section 128, which is the pilot project.
Mhm. But on section 5, this is repeal July 2028.
So what it's saying is, it's a pilot project until 2028.
Mhm.
And every year, no, doesn't include this year, but next year's budget and the following year's budget, by statute,
Mhm.
the commissioner needs to submit the money requested to run the program in his state budget. And I'm asking, is that problematic?
I think it could present some challenges just due to the lack of money that right now that we have that's kind of flexible in the system.
Even if it's just for a 2-year?
I think so. Isaac, do you want to?
I can just check specifically I'd be on the policy director for DOC. I think we've had some early conversations with Representative Squirrel, and I think there might be some potential to explore some just investment dollars.
That's for this year.
Yeah.
That's for FY
I
26.
think that would be base, like we would carve that
For
out. base.
ongoing?
That would be base funding, I believe.
I want to vet this a little bit because it's requiring you folks to have this as part of the governor's recommend. for the length of the pilot project, and I want to make sure DOC agrees with this or doesn't.
So we need to have a deeper conversation with Trevor.
Now, we need to talk to the commissioner a little bit more.
Is it too?
Him too.
But, and you can't bind the legislature, so what probes may want to do with Justice Reinvestment Two may only be for 1 year.
Mhm.
Folks know what I'm getting at
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I follow you.
Yeah.
It's really not our intent to create unfunded liability.
So you'd be codifying that, folks.
Mhm.
And then you're also on page 4, you're codifying the pilot project. So, this establishes the pilot project. And it would provide up in Newport. See, the Chittenden facility is not a pilot project. It says DOC shall establish pilot programs at Chittenden and Northern.
Just normal.
And Chittenden has been ongoing, so we gotta correct.
Right.
Did Ben bring that up at all?
Well, that came up, I think Ken gave me that feedback as we were putting the draft together. I relayed that to Ben. I'm recalling this now. This is weeks ago. I think Ben's answer was that this is technically, because we're putting this into statute, this technically becomes a pilot. It doesn't necessarily negate the fact that we already have an agreement between DOC and the Lund Center. And I don't know that this bill, right, if this bill didn't pass, that agreement would still very much be in place. It just doesn't change it to, I'm thinking and talking at the same time here, so I think that's accurate, that it would still be a pilot program to include both facilities because currently in statute, there's no such thing. It's an agreement between DOC and I think that accurately reflects the conversation I had with Ben when that question came up.
And that did come up briefly this morning with Ben as well.
Yeah, but we didn't go very deep.
Not deep, no.
Yeah.
So, I think we need to switch who's in the hot seat. You're coming in, Ken?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be back at you.
So welcome, Ken. If you could identify yourself, record. I think one thing that would be really helpful is to explain to the committee currently what your arrangement is, what Kids Apart arrangement is with DOC for the Chittenden facility.
Right to do that. So for the record, my name is Ken Schatz. I'm the interim CEO at Lund. Really appreciate your taking an interest in this issue, in this bill. And also want to appreciate the Department of Corrections, because in answer to your question in part, at a high level, it's been a wonderful partnership. And I think, we've really worked together over a long period of time. And right now, to specifically answer your question, Madam Chair, is we have a grant or a contract agreement from the Department of Corrections to provide funding to enable us to provide the Kids Apart program in the Chittenden Women's facility. We also do get, as you correctly indicated, we're asking for some additional money for that facility. The amount of money we receive from the Department of Corrections, generally speaking, supports the services in the facility itself, but we do a significant amount of services outside the facility with families, the caregivers, and other providers as appropriate for the family. So we do cobble together funding from other sources, including other state sources. So we use some parent-child center funding. We use some funding from the network on domestic and sexual violence, and we do fundraising as a nonprofit. That's how we operate. The reason for that ask is to stabilize the funding for the Chittenden facility, in addition to have adequate money for the pilot program in Newport that we've requested.
So right now, I want to I want to have a better understanding of what the cost is of providing Kids Apart and the visiting services to the Chittenden facility. You have a grant contract with DOC
Correct.
for Kids Apart to go in to the Chittenden facility and provide family visitation for the women offenders. What is the cost of that?
So you know what, I'm gonna give you my turn to have someone with more expertise actually answer your question. Kim LaRoche is here. She has much more specific knowledge about the budget. At some point, if appropriate, I'll come back to talk about the bill itself.
So I'd like to know what the cost of that is. And is DOC putting in any money towards that?
So again, Kim LaRoche, Director of Parent Child Center Services at Lund. So our current, I have it written down in a spreadsheet that I can share with you. So specific for Chittenden Regional, the cost of the entire program is $276,000. From that, DOC provides an annual contract of $161,000. That $161,000 pays for the programmatic expenses, gas cards, materials, as well as the full-time Kids Apart coordinator that Jess holds that role within the facility. So that's what that $161,000 of the DOC contract supports Kids Apart. But as Ken was mentioning, the Kids Apart parenting program as a whole, there's additional staffing that goes along with the entirety of the program. And so that's a case manager in the community working with caregivers and children, as well as that visitation coach. And so those salaries are funded through those resources that Ken spoke of, fundraising, finding other grants. But that's how we make the program whole.
So you get on a yearly basis, $161,000 from DOC. It's from DOC's budget. And that basically goes to some of the operations of it, which is gas cards possibly,
So
materials that are used
Yeah.
in the visitation for both parent and the child. And also the coordinator pays for the coordinator.
Mhm.
Well,
And then so that leaves about 115,000 left. What is that? Did that come from you all or other sources?
right, so it comes from a variety of sources. One, Lund does a lot of fundraising. So we have fundraising for that, as well as capturing different grant opportunities, applying for grants, being a subrecipient of grants that right now, like the network is paying for 12 hours of the visitation coach to facilitate that family connection. So it's nothing that is guaranteed. It's each fiscal year looking at additional opportunities to make this program fiscally whole.
right?
I don't know if I'm trying to oversimplify. In my mind, it's two buckets where the 161 is within the walls and that's DOC and the other 115 is outside, or is that too simple?
No, that's not.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, to a degree. So the programmatic expenses with the gas cards
Yeah.
and the materials based off of the parent education opportunities that we have, that is shared inside and outside. But
Okay.
Well,
So then I guess, because I believe we said we were gonna appropriate $400,000 in this, is that correct?
then there is the new site
it's
as well.
Site
Okay.
report.
It's both. Yeah, it's
I want to know what the cost is
of the new site.
and we've been paying for that cost. Part of it right along within DOC's budget. And how long have you been at the Chittenden facility?
So just, how long have you been at?
Yeah, we've been at the Chittenden facility specifically since 2011.
And they moved in.
Has been up and running since 2003. Can I clarify an answer to that question? I provide 40 hours of services within the facility. The two additional positions provide approximately 20 hours a week, I would say, inside the facility. So part of their time is, yes, out in the community, but part of their time. So we're providing something like 60 hours a week of
Okay, so
approximately.
yes, so the community case manager who's out in the community supporting caregivers and families
also is the one who provides that parent education and does some visits within the facility as well, but not based full-time like Jess is in the facility.
So just real quick, on back to that 400,000, because it says in here that it would be appropriated in 128, which includes CRCF in Northern State. So currently right now it's 161,000 just to the one program, but now you're going to two. So I think Alice asked this a minute ago, what's the breakdown of that 400,000 gonna look like? Is that up to your discretion, or do we need to cut there? Will
It's being,
appropriations deal with that?
it's being worked in a probe,
Okay.
and I know, I want to get the basis in terms of what you're providing now in Chittenden and what the cost is. Because my understanding is the 161 is already in DOC's budget for FY 26, correct? So the understanding that I'm understanding, there'd be additional money put on top of that 161 for Chittenden.
About $115,000 additional
More.
that's needed for Chittenden,
And then the remaining of the 400,000 would go to start it up in Newport.
about $268,000.
So what I need to know, what the committee needs to know is what you're offering now, what the cost is. You've been offering it for a long time for the women for 20 years. So it's a good program, not negating any of that. I'm just trying to follow the money. So if it's a $276,000 program, basically, to offer it in the women's facility. Okay? DOC's been providing 161,000 of that to date. So why is there an additional amount of money that needs to be put to Chittenden?
To make the program fiscally whole and supported fully by DOC. Currently, that deficit of $115,000 is each year being sought after by finding other grants or finding fundraising opportunities.
So what we're saying here is, instead of trying to find that 115, which is between the 276 and the 161, it will then be a state responsibility. Is that particular piece, the 115 additional to the 161, is that considered to be part of a pilot project? Because that's the language. That's the language that's before us.
May I respond? Ken Schatz again for the record. So I appreciate your point, by the way, about the pilot. As Troy indicated, I did question that myself. It is not, we don't believe the services at Chittenden facility are a pilot. It has been in existence a very long time. Obviously there's ways of drafting things, and I respect legislative council and ultimately your decision. From a practical standpoint, the Chittenden facility is not a pilot. And we do appreciate the support from the Department of Corrections, and as you asked and responded, we're asking for the additional 115,000 to make the program wholes from the perspective of funding from the Department of Corrections, as opposed to Lund having to every year try to cobble together additional funds to maintain the program as is.
Did Kids Apart ask the governor's office when the budgets were being put together last October, November, for an increase for DOC to increase their 161 to the 276 full? Was that 115 extra asked in the request to the governor for their budget?
I can't recall if I made that request directly previously.
And to be straightforward, this is Ken Schatz again, we did not have direct communication with the governor's office. Our communication is through the Department of Corrections. And I think the request over time has generally been made, but we understand that the Department of Corrections budget has limitations.
I defer to Haley, because Haley's on the study committee, over the course of the summer into the fall, December. We did have a variety of discussions about funding, especially towards the tail end of that study committee. Trying to think about, would this be a CDS request, general fund request? What does this look like? What are different avenues of funding that we can explore? Still having those conversations a little bit right now, but we were looking at a variety of funding mechanisms.
There was some promising federal funding that's no longer promising. So.
So would DOC be adverse to this being an ongoing budget amount in your budget, the 276? Because that's basically the door that we're opening here. You see?
He's in my corner again.
I mean, you can't give them money for 2 or 3 years and then pull it out.
Sure.
Because basically what we're doing is we're saying, if we go forward with this, we're basically saying we're gonna pay for the full freight at the Chittenden facility. And then we also have to figure out how much we're paying for the Newport facility. It's I understand the Newport one's a pilot because we're trying it out in the male facility. Female facility, it's been going on for over 20 years. So it's an established program. It's not a pilot.
Right. I missed the first part of the funding conversation, so forgive me. So we may have talked a little about this, but the program expansion is not captured in the governor's proposed budget. I'll be clear about that. And there is some money either through the Justice Reinvestment Pool or others that I think this fits very neatly in. It's already a base budget item, and we've over time looked for places to spend it where it can have the biggest impact. I think this would be a good fit for that money. And in that regard, it would be permanently baked in. It's already part of the base budget. And so you wouldn't see an up in next year's budget or any out year budget unless we increase the amount because it's already built right in. So I would look to funding sources like that that pre-exist. Like I said, we looked outside through federal appropriations, other places, haven't gotten a lot of traction there. So then it's looking at the general fund and trying to be good stewards of the tax dollar and keep the fund, our draw on the fund as low as possible, but there's already money there. So, I mean, I think that's a good place for us to aim our sights.
So is that a good place? The money is already there, Justice Reinvestment too. Is that a good place to continue the funding for Chittenden? And is that a good place to continue the funding for Newport and not do it as a pilot project in Newport? Just do it.
So forgive me again, I think the total that's needed is about 400, and I think the amount that's available in the JR2 bucket after everything else is pulled out is about 390. So we're pretty close to perfect.
But that would be for both filling the hole in Chittenden and then expanding the program to Newport. Does Newport have to be a pilot?
In my mind, I think that's semantics. If the funding is there.
So you were saying, Connor.
If it's one-time money, clearly that takes the flavor of a pilot. And certainly we want to test before we institute a long-term program, but I think we have the proof of concept at CRCF. And so if there's permanent funding available, then I don't see why you necessarily need to tie yourselves to the pilot.
James, Connor, and Kevin.
Well, I just want to clarify the chair's question. Are you saying that instead of a bill, that we have discussions with our fine commissioner and they on their own do what they've already done in Chittenden and say, we're going to do this, we commit to doing this, and we'll test it out without this level of legislation, or are you going in a different direction that I misunderstood?
I think it's two parts here.
Okay.
The question is, we have a program that is through an agreement.
That's what I mean.
Okay. The question before the committee is, do we codify this program?
Right.
Is it a program that we want to carry through, not only just at the women's facility, but also at our male facilities? And not have it through an agreement, but have it in law. That's the first thing. And then if we decide that, yes, we should codify this, the question then becomes, do we just do this at first as a pilot project in Newport? Or do we just say this is a policy that we will have this type of visitation for our parents who are incarcerated regardless of male or female facilities?
So what I'm getting at from that is, are you maybe you don't have one or the other as a choice, but like, are you advocating that potentially we just say, hey, listen, can we move forward as an agreement for now? Just check it out and not have this level of legislation go with an agreement. I don't know how you do that. Like, is there a memorandum? Like, how's that work? Or is that what you're saying? Or
No,
you're just like,
that's not what I was saying.
we're just putting it on the table?
I'm saying we have an agreement right now.
Right.
with GOC and Kids Apart for the women's facility.
Mhm.
Okay. Do we want to continue with Chittenden with an agreement and be
Right.
silent on everything else? Or do we want to codify that having a program similar to Kids Apart, whatever it may be, offered to our male and female folks who are incarcerated, who are who are parents, that is a state policy and we put that in statute.
So we
That's
couldn't-
what I'm saying.
Okay, so we couldn't have an agreement that just like Chittenden, but also at Newport.
Depends where the committee goes.
Well, that's what I'm trying to ask. Yeah,
Yeah.
not successfully, but
Okay.
Connor and then Kevin.
So like first an observation, we're talking about pilot projects. When you give someone a service like this, it's a lot harder to take it away from them afterwards once you've done that. So we're saying pilot, but I think going forward, that would be tough to do, put the cap back on it. And I have a question for DOC. The way this is structured, would you envision it being two separate contracts or one contract that you expand for the two facilities? Question like, obviously, I think we'd all be thinking Lund, right? But these have to be competitively bid if it's a contract there. So
Good question. I'm not sure that I know the answer to that off the top. But people smarter than me probably have the answer.
The current contract is run through, I don't know if we've had Kathy Asnaborski speak this year, but she's our Director of Women's Services and she oversees all the contracts at CRCF specifically. So I think we'd have to consider how that would fit within our organizational structure.
thanks.
Kevin?
I would imagine that there will have to be differences between the women's program and the men's program. What do you envision as being the difference?
To a degree, we would adapt to fathers, the program that we currently provide for women. But for the most part, the programs are already baked. They're already in creation. And we would use those same programs within the men's facility. We would want to get some guidance and support from experts who have worked with fathers, incarcerated fathers, to adapt to make it most applicable to fathers. But we wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. The program exists.
So you're not aware of any specific differences at this point?
I mean, when I really think about what the services would look like, for example, a woman enters the Chittenden facility. She has 2 children in DCF custody. I meet with her, I provide an intake. Okay, so the same thing, a dad enters Newport. He requests services. I meet with him. We start with an intake. His 2 children are in DCF custody. We reach out to DCF, to the DCF worker, open up the lines of communication, schedule meetings between that parent and the DCF worker. We begin to ask questions about what parent-child contact will look like. We develop a family service plan. Who do these children look like? What are the needs of this parent? What are the needs of the caregiver in the community to continue supporting the child? We develop a parent-child contact plan. Visits are not going to happen with this family because these children live 3.5 hours away, and it's established that there really isn't sufficient, consistent transportation. So we're going to look at video visitation. We develop a video visitation schedule. We have a roster of classes that we offer and a schedule throughout the year. We assess what this particular parent's needs are and whether the next upcoming class is an appropriate referral for them. So in most ways, the program will look very similar to how it does now, with the addition of obviously determining what more we can learn specifically about working with dads, but we do already work with fathers. They're the caregivers of the children we work with. We work with families, so we're already, I believe, very well versed in providing support to families.
Just one more follow-up and then
Yeah.
I'll pass it on. I would imagine you would need more security for the men than you do for the women. Maybe I'm wrong.
Every client that we work with on a case-by-case basis, and there's a program agreement that gets signed during that initial intake, and there's expectations of behavior in the program. When you enter my office, there are expectations in how you'll conduct yourself respectfully, and that in turn you will be treated respectfully. So, clients who are not able to meet those basic expectations to participate in the program, we wouldn't be talking about extra security. We would be talking about what is it that you need to do in order to be able to participate.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But until you've established that relationship and you know what the relationship is,
Yeah, so we work very closely with the facility, and if there were concerns about a specific individual, those would be discussed and addressed long before we got to a visit. So I don't anticipate that we would need additional security for visits. Would you say that's a fair?
Yeah, I don't think, yeah. I often, what I think our experience has been system-wide is when you deliver programs to folks that they really want benefits from, they try not to jeopardize that in any way that they can. And that's not always true, but by and large, I mean, I wouldn't be as concerned about the security side of this.
Right, and then Joe.
So just to clarify, Jess, that automatic intake that currently happens at CRCF does not currently happen in our men's facilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's accurate. Okay. And to answer the question that you posed, Madam Chair, I do think, and I've said this, all session long so far, especially with regard to MOUD, I do think it's important to put this in statute. I do think Section 24 on page 3 is an important statement that this is how we do corrections in Vermont. And we don't rely just on agreements, as wonderful as those agreements have been. I think it's important to put into statute that this is an expectation that when we as a state decide to incarcerate parents, we create an obligation to do that in a humane, just way that actually improves skills of the parents we're incarcerating and simultaneously maintains connections for children of those parents. I think it's really important to put that in statute. So that's where I land on that question.
Well, Troy, my question is a counterpoint to yours, I guess, in some ways. But just to restate from my understanding, the women's program has existed since 2003. Is that accurate? And that's not in statute. So, I mean, I think that establishes that there's good intent and a track record thereof from DOC to perpetuate these programs. But at the same time, I don't think that we should be in a situation where we're boxing in future budgets, whereby there may be situations where those resources just aren't available. So I would argue that I don't think it should be in statute.
I'm gonna go to Ken first and then you, Connor.
Thank you.
Oh, Brian, you had your hand.
I'm happy to wait it goes. I'll be brief. I mean, I appreciate this conversation. I just wanted to say that in terms of the use of the word pilot, it was somewhat intentional, recognizing that there are some differences between women and men, as you've heard. But we do think it's a solid model. But we recognize also that this was one step towards a goal of having this kind of service available to all of the parents who are incarcerated, whether male or female. So part of the idea of a pilot was, this is in Newport, but if it is successful, hopefully there would be interest and support for expanding it to the other facilities. And that is described in the bill, and we think that's helpful. And to that end, I want to at least briefly mention that Kim has had some conversations with UVM, recognizing that the idea of a pilot is you look to see whether or not it's been successful in meeting the goals. And so we appreciate that there's value in having a research partner, and Kim can talk a little bit more about it, but thought was during the course of the pilot, we would provide information and research. Hopefully it will indicate success and support for decisions regarding expansion. And we appreciate the financial challenges related to that, but thought it would be helpful to have the goal, have some process to address whether or not we can get there.
Right, and then Connor.
So I guess the two cost questions, one is about the current program with the women. Are all the women who want to be taking advantage of this able to do so? And are there any services you're not offering that you would want to? Like, is it the size that it should be and will stay, or might that change?
Yeah, I mean, Jess does the work, so I would lean to Jess, but my understanding is that the women who want to be in the Kids Apart parenting program at CRCF receive those services and supports both within the facility and outside the facility.
And then the other question, and this goes back to the chair's line of questioning, now I'm confused. The 400,000 for the pilot, and now I'm confused about the pilot. Is that 400 plus 115 to make CRCF whole? So the 115 comes out of the 4 and the 285 goes to the.
Yeah, Northern
What is now
has a
pilot?
cost of 268.
Okay,
And to make CRCF fiscally whole, it's an additional 115.
okay.
That's 115 plus 268.
So you're closer to the 390 though. Okay, thanks.
So Connor.
Oh, sure. Yeah, he's just gonna say, I get where you're coming from, Joe. At the same time, like, this guy's cool, but I don't know what the next commissioner is going to be like. So I do think if we want to look at the long-term viability, I do think putting in statute makes sense, maybe with the line that it is contingent on the funding, so we're not throwing an unfunded liability at the department going forward, because I'd have real concerns with that competing with some other functions. And then it puts some onus on this committee to fight for that with the budget every year, It's
I'm wondering what language we put in for come on in, Ben. For the pretrial supervision, because that was contingent on funding.
Yeah. But we talked about it quite a bit,
We
so I
did
remember.
talk about it quite a bit. We're having fun with this bill. So
About pretrial supervision.
No. So I guess I'm grappling with two different things here. One thing is for money wise, I know the bill just doesn't do the appropriation for the money. Unfortunately, it's kind of coming together with what's happening in Appropriations Committee right now. So there's two separate issues that I'm seeing. One is with Chittenden. You've had the program for 20 years. It's successful. Want to continue it. But your request, Kids Apart request, is really to have the state pay for the full program, not have to depend on that 115,000 to do fundraising or try to find some other grants. The real request is that the DOC would pay for Kids Apart in full for Chittenden. That's one piece that my brain is going to. Am I off base on that one?
That's correct.
Does the committee understand
Yep.
that? Where does the committee fall on that one?
I've been a problem with that part.
That's one. So folks,
I don't know what the context was, how the program was initiated. So has this historically been the case that there's been a,
since 2003. Been there for what, 22? Kids Apart has been working with family visitation with the women incarcerated folks for 20 plus years, right? Isaac?
But just if it might be helpful for committee members to talk about the JRI funds and how they work.
I don't want to confuse it.
Just like that funding would be base. And that we have over the past several years, since we stabilized that funding source, we have been kind of slowly carving off chunks of that $900,000 appropriation for base cases, something 300,000 for the network that goes in every year, the 108,000 for barge that goes in every year. So we've already created that precedent, which is where it gets a little tricky because now the pot that's discretionary shrinks every year. And I think that the council members, of which the commissioner is one, that was created out of S14 a few years ago to administer that fund. I think that council has recommended we just move to all base funding because we keep bringing together a council to talk about it.
It's all the council.
Yeah.
Right. So that goes into the weeds that a lot of committee members haven't been here when we're working on justice reinvestment too. What you're saying is within that 900,000, there is enough money of the 116, right? 115 to carry that through as an ongoing base expenditures for Chittenden, for Kids Apart in Chittenden. Do the new members follow that?
Yep.
Yes.
It's building your budget, ongoing. It's gonna be there, ongoing. It's in the base.
So instead of having a fundraise, they have.
Money's there.
Yeah, the money's there. For the full amount.
I'm on board with you.
Is there an opportunity cost there whereby some other program is being funded in the past?
So, no, that
answer is
funding,
no.
originally that funding was meant to be one-time use. But we realized it's very difficult to build programs on
One-time use.
And we heard that from a variety of stakeholders that receive GRI funds. So we moved towards more of a base funding model. So now it's kind of split.
You want to weigh in?
Basically half.
A reminder to the committee
Yes.
is that Joe's Justice Reinvestment Funds eventually are, everything is successful are gonna go away.
Well, I think we built in an it's automatically 900,000, regardless of the savings on out-of-state beds.
Right, but if that needs to be a distinction that the committee understands. But if you're talking about JR2 funding as opposed to that 900,000, there is a difference.
But it's the 900,000 that we're talking about. That was carved out a few years ago. That was 900,000 every year. Some of the 900,000 was done with one-time money, but we're saying now it's gonna be building the base. And building the base means it's gonna be there every year in their operating costs.
Yeah.
It's not a one-time expenditure, it's ongoing.
Right. It's a question for the Lund folks. Sort of obviating that necessity to hustle for the 115. And I hate hustling myself, but like, yeah, getting grants and getting donations, totally. So are there people doing that who that's not their job description? Is this going to free you up to do that sort of work for a different thing? Like what is adding in that 115 change or whatever?
Maybe that's appropriate for me to respond. So the short answer is yes, it would free us up, both in terms of staff and our effort to utilize some of our staff who spend time looking for that money, whether it's through the donations or looking for grants. We can focus on other things to expand some of the excellent programs as a cheerleader, I'll say, that we provide to support children and families. So absolutely, this has a benefit from Lund's perspective, which would inure to the benefit of Vermont children and families.
And I don't know enough about your staff. Like, do you employ full-time grant writers? I assume not. Or is somebody moonlighting? Like, how does it...
No, I'll be straightforward. We have a development and communications division that actually has 4 staff. So it's both development and communications, to be fair. But it's a lot of work. For those of you familiar with the nonprofit sector, and I'll be honest and say this is a relatively new experience for me, I'm impressed by the amount of time and energy that it takes to raise money and to frankly answer opportunities for grants. Even that drafting application for grants is a time-consuming, challenging process, but it's part of what nonprofits need to do. So yes, that's a significant aspect of our work, and having stable funding. And I appreciated the comment earlier, Isaac, who pointed out that the challenge when you just get one-year grants, you're almost constantly in a cycle looking for money, and having a stable source of funding obviously helps a lot.
So are we there as a full committee to support the ongoing appropriation for the additional 115,000 to the Chittenden facility? for that? Are we on board as a committee for that? I'm seeing some questions.
Yeah, I'm okay with that piece of it.
So it's no longer a pilot. Chittenden would not be a pilot and is ongoing, is my understanding. So then the next question is expanding the program to the male facility, and it was recommended that we start at the Newport facility. The cost for that would be about $268,000 for that. So the question is, do we do that as an ongoing one? And learn from that and gradually expand it to other male facilities? Or do we just do that one as a pilot for 3 years? And draw the information and knowledge from how that's operated up in Newport before we expand it to other male facilities? Kevin?
I would think that it would be prudent to do it as a pilot.
Other folks? Brian?
I know, I'm taking up all the air, I'm sorry. Given the size of the facility and the number of people who might take advantage of it, is it possible, and maybe this is a DOC question, to get most of the folks who would, most of the fathers who would want to take part in one or two, like, must this be extended to most or all? If it's to be equitable?
The same thing if all the dads were put in
I know,
one facility.
there are a few, well, we're housing mostly older folks with the infirmary, right? So
It could
the
be,
storks up here.
it could be a consideration, but for example, a father who might want to utilize that service and might have complex medical needs and they would need to be at Southern, so they might not be able to, multiple folks like that. People have court dates for transferring them, or if they have certain programming that they need to undergo, and that's at Northwest, for example, then they wouldn't be able to be at Northern, but it's certainly something that we could take into consideration when those placements are determined.
I guess family networks would make it crazy too, but yeah. All right.
Just kind of going back to what I said before, can I ask Lund, what does it look like on the human level if we did this on a pilot? Doesn't look like it's working out, and then we take it away. And people have started having reconnections with their children, and like, to me, that's a really rough pilot, if yeah.
I mean, that's real. You said to give something and then take it away. That would be a challenge. We would be able to anticipate if there is no ongoing for that and be able to support those incarcerated fathers and their families on the outside to prepare for that. It'd be unfortunate, but we would communicate and prepare ahead of time.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's before us to determine, do you really do it as a pilot? Or is this going to be part of the policy of DOC? And they start with Newport facility. Because there's no way you can roll it out all at once in all the facilities. There's just no way. But we have the track record of how Kids Apart have been working for 20+ years in one facility. It's been a good track record. We wanted to expand it. The bulk of our inmate population are males. Probably over half of them are parents, one way or another. And why shouldn't they have the same services as the females? Troy?
Yes, wholeheartedly to that point, this is gender parity. And at no fault of anybody in this room, when Kids Apart formed this partnership with the Department of Corrections, somebody somewhere said, it's the women who are parents. And there's reasons why we live with those unfortunate stereotypes and gender norms in this country, but they're not accurate. Men are parents as well. Over the past few decades, we have increasingly improved our capacity to understand that men are caregivers as well, that men are parents as well. And unfortunately, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that wasn't part of the conversation when we decided that incarcerated parents need support. It's long past time that we fix that. When I asked the question not too long ago, I can't remember the gentleman's name who was here for DOC, about the worry I have if we don't build a new facility for women. I'm worried that one of two things is going to happen. The women are going to continue to languish in that abhorrent facility, or we're going to start looking at out-of-state facilities to house them. That really worries me. The answer I got was, well, we would be hesitant to do that because a lot of those women are parents. And again, that mentality is still with us, and this statute would correct that and acknowledges that men are parents as well, and that incarcerated parents, all of them, need our support, deserve our support, and that's how we do incarceration in Vermont. So I think it's incredibly important that, and will long past due, that this gender parity conversation comes to its obvious conclusion.
Yeah, I think I'd be on the same page. You know, in my mind, we already did a pilot for the last 20 years there, and it's successful enough that we keep doing it. So I would probably vote for ongoing, maybe again with some of that, like contingent on funding, so DOC can be the bad guys and not us. The budget's a bit tight, but I think that's where I'm at.
Well, I have concerns about the cost, especially ongoing and larger, but Troy's main point was something that's been bothering me for years that anybody doesn't know. My son's 27 now, but I am one of the many single fathers that I had full custody of my son. And we were always dad, like, yo, wait a minute, you're just a dad. It's always you just a dad. And it's always ticked me off beyond belief is something. So I'm 100% with you on that. I'm just concerned about the cost, but I think it's something we should be looking at because it isn't just one side that's the parent.
So the cost, if you listen to what Commissioner said and Isaac said, there is base funding within that 900,000. And what Representative Squirrel is looking at is to use about a third of that 900 base funding for this program.
Yeah. My concern for cost is after that, it's to all the institutions. I'm not saying it's a bad thing either. I'm just saying that's where the real money's going to come in.
Right.
When it starts getting expanded to other.
And as you expand, we would, look at what the cost is. So this is the cost to expand into one men's facility, having case manager inside, outside, and visitation coach. But as you expand it, not every facility will need that entire setup, that there could be a community case manager working with multiple sites.
And I don't oppose
Right.
this. I'm just
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
it's something
Mhm.
we are obligated to look at.
But I would imagine you've taken the time to project what that would look like. I
We
mean,
have not projected what
if
it
I were
looks
in your
like to
shoes, I
support.
would be doing the same thing you're doing. I would love someone to take over the fundraising instead of me having to do it. I would like to sell that all the facilities utilize our. So have you done that? Have you projected what it would cost to put it in all the facilities?
We have not. I mean, part of it is wanting to see what it would cost to actually run a program at, in Newport. And then, as Kim has indicated, we would have a better basis for figuring out how could we have cost savings, so we didn't necessarily have the same cost by each additional facility, but we have not projected that.
Because there will be differences,
Exactly.
even if you can't identify the differences now. So.
And we did discuss that in the study committee, to be fair, Haley, about the differences.
Yeah, one of the things I would note, we determined that Northern would be appropriate because size, a lot of men there are sentenced. For the three kind of more regional facilities, Northwest, Northeast, and Marble Valley, it might not have kind of the same population of men who would take advantage of that program. So it might not be appropriate to have everywhere. Maybe it would be appropriate to have that same model of having it like an established program at each of the male
Or
facilities.
part-time versus
Yeah.
full-time.
There's a lot
or-
of detainees, quick turnover.
But once you have the structure of it at the top, you don't have to reinvent it. And that's what you're looking at for the male facilities. You need to get the structure set up first. And then so the thinking is, let's get the structure set up first. And then let's focus that on the Newport facility. If you were to expand it, say, to the Springfield facility or to the St. Albans facility, you got that head structure already in place for the males. It's just you've got to put some people to actually on the ground in St. Albans or Springfield. But you already got that administrative in place. And that's what you really need. Carry it out.
Assess the success of the program in a men's facility before you expand it statewide. And that's where the collaboration with UVM, they're really excited about partnering with London Kids Apart to provide a research experience, or they're one of their researchers to work specifically within Northern to look at data and research about this program and measure the successes.
So, Madam Chair, it's sounding like you're thinking we should do a pilot to start to get
Well,
us.
I'm not even thinking of a pilot. What I'm kind of thinking is, we extended to one male facility. And then sort of like, in order for it to be expanded to the other male facilities, that in 2 years, based on the data that's collected, whatever that may be, the legislature will then make the decision on whether or not to expand it to the other male facilities. A pilot indicates that you're gonna pull it back away from Newport. But what I'm considering is, yes, we're gonna go forward with this. Newport's where we're doing it. If it really works in Newport, we'll get the report back before we make that decision of expanding it to other facilities, but we continue with Newport regardless. That's sort of where I'm thinking. And I'm not thinking of it as a pilot.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes any
No, it
sense.
makes sense.
Sean?
In the whole scheme of things, it doesn't seem like a whole lot of money to me. So, and I kind of look at it as an investment in these kids. And my hope is that they have some connection with their father, that then years down the road, they've established that love or that nurture. It may not be what we all think it should be, but it's something, whatever you guys can talk about that. But it just seems to me that you could save a lot of these kids from doing the same thing that their parents did. And if we get 10 of them not to do it, it's worth every dime that we put into it. Anyway, that's my.
I echo that point. We hear a lot from our facility staff that they see kind of generations of families cycling through. If you've been there for long enough, then you might know someone and then meet their child and their grandchild. And I certainly agree with your point that it's an investment in ensuring that we don't spend those costs in the future on incarceration.
And what is it? 300, what are we talking about? $300,000 or $400,000. It's not a lot of money. To me, anyway,
That is the true point of the justice reinvestment dollars.
so-
Is investments we can make to reduce the use of incarceration in the future. And what better way to do that than in children?
And there is research that speaks to the benefit to the family, to the children, to the fathers who are engaged in a parenting program while incarcerated, the benefits.
But unfortunately, as Ben pointed out, we do have to be very focused on the fact that money will go away eventually.
I don't think so, not that 900,000. That one we've been pretty clear about for that.
The only way that money would actually go away is if we eliminated our out-of-state contract.
We ain't eliminating unless Troy gets his way.
You're in a corner.
Yeah, this is something, Troy. You're the only one that can kill this. So I'm asking, I agree with what you're saying. So that basically need to send Ledge Council back to rewrite this too.
We gotta work on language.
Yeah.
We gotta work on language. Because I also want to spend time with the committee working through on page 4 in terms of what the program would include for services and programming. We've got to look at that line by line and understand what it's saying.
Is back-up funding justice reinvestment? Did we come up with a different way to take care of the CJCs, or are they competing for that money as well?
No, that's what Trevor was talking about and
Get rid of the word.
So
pilot.
CJC, and let go of the money.
So hold up, what is CJC?
Community Justice Centers.
Okay,
Yeah, so what S one ninety-five did last year is that it changed the funding from DOC to the Attorney General's office for community justice centers, which are the providers of, for lack of a better term, community justice or restorative justice services and program. So it did not create a stabilized funding structure, but it shifted who issues the funding because the Department of Corrections last year indicated that they would be shifting the use of those funds to something else. And so the Attorney General was agreed to shoulder the responsibility to fund those organizations.
And Representative Squirrel reached out to the CJCs to see if this up to 400,000 could be pulled and used differently, and he said they were fine. That's what he told me yesterday.
Said what?
They were fine. CJCs were fine.
I haven't been up to speed on the AGO budget request, but last I heard, I think they were putting forward 1.7 million for CJCs for pre-charged.
What did you just say? That's the Attorney General funds. I didn't follow it in.
C's budget for 1 point whatever for CJCs.
Which is included in the pre-charge diversion program.
There's a lot of technology, a lot of technical language here. You'll get used to it. It takes time. So have we made progress that we're not doing the pilot project?
I think so.
That we are going to fund the Chittenden facility in full. And I don't know if that even has to have language in the bill for that, because that's through the appropriations committee. But that's gonna,
Just call it.
so we need what?
We need to know our intent so that they will follow it.
It's in our letter to approach, which we're gonna have to have Ben come in here pretty soon. And you're here.
Yes, Bill.
And then we want to provide this Kids Apart programming to our males, our dads, where we have 1,400 people who are incarcerated. About 120 of those are women. You got about 1,300 males who are incarcerated, and probably half of them are dads at least. And to provide for them the same opportunities to keep their relationship with their kids going while they're incarcerated. So we'd start at the Newport facility. It would not be a pilot. We start at the Newport facility, and then in 2 years, we do a report back from Kids Apart and from DOC in terms of how it's working. And the legislature will make the decision on whether or not to expand it to the other male facilities.
And so those would both be statutory obligations then, the Chittenden Central and Northern? I'm not agreeable to that, but you don't need me to agree.
Kevin?
I fully agree with Sean's assessment of the potential value. But whether we call it a pilot or not, if you put it in one facility and don't put it in the others, you've essentially not been equitable to all the men. So we're setting ourselves up for a considerably larger base requirement moving forward. And that's fine if that's what we know what we're doing, but if we don't realize that, we just need to understand, it's gonna come from someplace.
But the flip side, we have under state custody 1,400 people. And probably a good half of them are parents.
Yeah.
And we're offering services to one gender and not the other.
Yeah, this does move us towards equity, not away from it.
And the other thing I'm gonna throw in here, we're spending a lot of time replacing a women's facility, which needs to be replaced. But we also need to replace some male facilities. And if we just say, oh, we've done the women, and we pat ourselves on the back, we've left the other part not taken care of,
Yeah.
with the same opportunities as a reentry facility.
Yeah.
So fair is fair.
And
And there's a cost to it. But these folks are under state custody. They're under the commissioner's custody. They're under the state, and we have a responsibility one way or another. And we can't pick and choose the genders.
and off the cuff, somebody online will have a fit about this probably, but the data shows that relationships with fathers is a huge indicator of a child's success or failures. All the negative indicators of not having a dad are huge. So that's kind of important that that positive relationship is formulated.
I think it would be really helpful to know how many men would say that they're parents and want to have a continued relationship. It would be really nice to just know that number. It's only.
In the other facilities?
I mean, if you only got 100 out of 400, I'm not thinking it's 600. I think it's like 300 altogether, but that's just a guess, but it'd be really helpful to know that, to know what we're up against down the road. Is it in there?
That's just for Northern. We could certainly.
Well, I got that too. Yeah,
The statewide, how many incarcerated men identify as fathers?
correct. That would just be great information for us to have.
Mary and Kevin?
Well, I do have to agree with Kevin because I'm concerned that, you know, folks in the other prisons, should they be hearing of such a new program, are going to feel like, how was that prison picked and we weren't, and how did this all go? So, I mean, that is concerning to me. So if there was a way for us to at least get a number or a ballpark figure here of how many fathers, and I'm not sure how we can launch this out all at once, but I'm just afraid of being equitable to all of the population. Picking one just doesn't seem really how to happen.
So is there when a person is coming in to be booked, is there a question that's asked of them if they're a parent, if they have dependent?
There is. But we can check and see what the data looks like.
There is a question that
My
asks.
understanding is that even if there is a question, men don't necessarily self-identify as a father, as they perhaps may not see any benefit to disclosing that.
It was asked in booking for a number of years, and at some point, I think that question may have stopped. Yes, but the question was, are you the biological or adopted parent of a minor child and or children, and are those children in a safe place? So that was being asked for a number of years.
In general, the data we sometimes get at booking though can be highly general. It's voluntary. Folks might be in highly dysregulated states or altered states when they're booked. So we can look at other ways to try and gather this information as well.
That is true.
Kevin, and then we'll go to you, Ben.
Well, and thank you, Mary. I still think it would be helpful if you can do some kind of a ballpark as to what you'd see rolling it out in all the facilities. Because there should be some synergy, the overhead should be shared, et cetera. But if we don't know what the total bill would look like if we were to do it right now, I think we'd be unwise.
We'd have to get information about how many men identify as fathers, and then.
Trust me, we're looking at dartboard numbers all the time in here.
Yeah.
But it's better than nothing.
Yeah, we could certainly get that information.
Maybe that's something we would come back in 2 years and have done some of that survey work, so we could lay the groundwork for potential future conversations.
Ben?
For the committee's knowledge, I don't believe that such a requirement is in statute. If it were, it would probably be in the classification statute, which I think is 28 VSA 701 or 701B or 702 or 3. One of them. But my memory serves, it's not a statutory requirement, so maybe that's why it went to the wayside, because it may have been practice or policy
What is not a statutory requirement?
to ask about guardianship or parental status.
Upon booking.
Correct.
Kevin?
But
And
this,
Sean?
but this would be a program that they want to participate in. So I would think that if it's possible to just survey, you know, if we had this kind of a program, how many of you men would say that you're dads? I would think you'd get that information reasonably easily.
Yeah, and that's what we did at Northern, and that's what we can do with other five facilities.
I have a question then. So,
Sorry.
but does that kind of then say, should we call the Northwestern Men's Facility a pilot program? Northern, whatever it's called, that prison up north. Can we call that a pilot so that it does, so people are just hearing it as a pilot, they're seeing how it goes instead of making it just a program? Does that help us?
Phase one of an expansion.
That's a policy.
Or something like that.
Right.
What, I'm just trying to like, just so that people, you know, so that we don't
Right.
get
that's-
ourselves in a corner.
Right,
So,
that's where I
so what
was-
if we did do phase it in, phase it out? And then over the summer and fall, DOC needs to report to Joint Justice about how many, in the other facilities, how many identify as parents. You could get that by the fall, right? You could get that information by the fall, report back to Joint Justice Oversight, and have Joint Justice Oversight report back with a recommendation of how and when to expand the Kids Apart to the other facilities. Putting that out on the table is a thought.
That's the way I would like, because that's what I thought, if we do kind of phase it in as a pilot or the start of a program.
Right.
Then the other facilities aren't really necessarily thinking they were kind of left beside, you know, on the side of the road, and we picked this one. So this way you're rolling it out and
You're rolling it out.
and hopefully building the strength of it, so then we can roll it out.
And then I liked what Connor said way at the beginning. It's phase one with a rollout contingent on funding.
Right. Well,
And we have some language to that effect. So I hope Ben is paying attention to some of it.
It's not, he's checking his
I'm
fan.
multitasking.
So we get away from the pilot, you do it as a phase in. We know we've got the money building the base for the Newport one as phase one. You need to collect some data in terms of how many males would identify as dads in the other facilities. Report that information to Joint Justice in the interim. And Joint Justice will make a recommendation in terms of whether to roll it out to some of the other facilities and the time frame for that, and make sure it's contingent upon funding.
so all in favor?
How does the committee feel on that one as the beginning structure?
I like what you just said. Yeah.
Huh?
You've done this before, Madam Chair.
Huh?
You've done this before.
Done what?
No.
I also want to ask how many would want to take advantage of such a program. I mean, who knows if it.
Yep, that could be part of this.
But just to clarify, phased implementation, whether committee wants to call it a pilot or not, is completely up to the committee. A report back to Justice Oversight on data points that I think are still being
Well,
crystallized.
it's basically how many males would identify as dads in the other facilities and would want to participate in a program like this.
Identify and desire participation, and then contingent on funding. So those are the three things.
Yeah.
Phased implementation, report back, contingent on funding.
And at the Chittenden facility, it's its own separate thing with funding that we're basically silent on because the funding is in the probes.
So do you want to remove Chittenden Regional from the bill?
Yes,
Okay,
I would
so
think
it
so,
would just
because it's
be
not, right,
over Northern staff.
northern.
Well, are we codifying this? We're not codifying Chittenden, we're
No, we're not.
codifying.
So we
Program.
codify the program.
Yeah.
You codify the program, which it's 128, but it's a pilot program that we've codified. So you codify the program, and the program starts on page 4, lines 8. And that's what we're gonna have to spend time looking at, that language, but I don't wanna do that now, because we've gotta shift gears to something else. But
So the way to address that would probably be in the implementation portion. Say that it would start, even though it already exists in contract form at Chittenden Regional, it may be prudent for the committee to also mention that phase one of the codification of the program starts at those two facilities.
That's good. Right, so on the strike all.
Yep.
Okay, so that's where, but the structure of the program that we are putting in statute is on page 4, beginning on line 8, and goes all the way through line 14 on page 5. So we're gonna have to spend a lot of time looking at that language for that, and that will be the next thing that we'll work on for that. And I'd like to spend some time on that. We want to get this bill out for crossover. We're gonna have to spend some time on that this week. And we have time. I know Friday is wide open.
Same.
Huh?
Same for me.
We'll meet you then. And I know that probably we can fit it in at some point tomorrow as well. For that, probably at 11. I'm thinking 11 o'clock tomorrow. We could spend some time as a committee, possibly working on language.
Just gonna say, Chairman, I don't think I could turn around something.
No, but we've got the language here on page 4.
Sleep a couple hours. I'll let you know.
Well, I would say tomorrow at 11 o'clock, we can work on that language as a committee for that. And I don't know who might be available on such short notice between one and DOC. You could be here.
We're in the Senate tomorrow morning. 2 separate committees, economic development and health.
We'll wing it here.
The good news is there's 3 of you.
He said that, not us. And I don't know, Lon, you could either be here or Zoom in. It's better if you're here, to be honest with you.
We'll make sure.
Yeah, but I think we can do 11 o'clock tomorrow, because I think our 10 o'clock isn't gonna take us long. It won't take 2 hours, so let's pick up where we left off today.
I just want to make certain I didn't know 11 o'clock.
Hold on, I don't have it on my agenda.
I might not have given you the new one. Let me check.
You're slipping, Phil.
Yeah.
Given some.
We're all sick. We're all sick.
Sounds better than yesterday.
Ooh.
The room in general. The aggregate.
Sounds better.
Great. It's.
It was all coughing yesterday.
Yeah, I know.
Got us doing governor's recommend capital budget, ACCD housing infrastructure tomorrow at 11.
Yeah. We got that whole gang coming tomorrow.
At 11
Yeah.
You have a whole.
on the,
Barry Bennington,
oh,
Brattleboro.
that
We
crew.
do have 2 o'clock tomorrow.
Okay, so 2 o'clock tomorrow. We'll do 2 o'clock tomorrow.
I mean, 3 places.
Yeah, I can't be here too. I've been house ups.
No, that's fine.
I was gonna say, I mean, if you were to choose to delay it to Friday, it would give me time to create language and I could be here for as long as you want, but that's
We may have to do that because this language here may not stay
right.
Yeah.
as we work through it for that. So let's try H 219 at 2 o'clock tomorrow. You guys can do 2 o'clock tomorrow. And the 1 o'clock may run a little later. I don't know, because we're doing the work crew thing. So we're on the floor at 3 tomorrow. I don't think we're gonna have a lot, so maybe we can pick it up after the floor as well.
Well, that's right. Our opportunity for a star is coming up today, isn't it?
My God.
Okay, are we good, folks, so that we can shift gears here real fast?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, you guys might want to stay here.
What?
You'll see, right? Or we'll stay here.
Oh, we're staying.
Yep.
DOC.
Bye, guys.
You too, but.
We're going over our level. We're going over our level.
Skates, Alice.
Yeah. She's coming back.
You just escaped.
The alien skates.
She'll be back. We need men.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks.
So has this been posted to our webpage?
Oh, Ben, you finally arrived.
No, weird.
Everybody.
Yeah, we are.
Everybody.
I've spent all day.
Yeah, dude.
So our recommends to approach are due today.
We're going back to that.
It's the newest one.
If it's, yeah, I think so.
Are there any new recommendations from yesterday?
Ben sent us another one.
Again?
Not new, but this is a formal
Oh, okay.
thing that we can go through. I think we're,
Nothing that's been added since what, yesterday?
For better or worse.
no, but this is the language,
I understand.
Ben sent us something
but it has to be worked through.
at 1:54.
That must be this.
Okay. What was it? What time was this?
Yeah.
So we're back to
The
the
email
Ellis.
in this?
Ellis.
This one's okay.
Back to the
The
original.
one that I sent today. So I sent two today. One of an updated version of the letter, and then I just sent more recently to Phil and you two, the bill language.
Okay. So.
Isn't it this, a memorandum?
Yeah.
Everyone should have this on their desk. Everyone,
This is the letter we're gonna read over.
We got it. Yeah, and Alice, if that's the one that where all the things say the committee recommends or proposes, and that's the, okay, then we're in business.
it supports the following proposals and recommendations.
Yeah.
I think we need to make a little clarity.
Well, I did in each bullet as well.
I know, but after discussions with the commissioner, does the commissioner have this copy of this?
We're working on it.
Because I know there's some issues here.
We're on the memorandum.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
There's some issues that are percolating.
Oh, the old.
Wow. Without.
That's actually moving quicker than I've seen it.
Okay.
So this was put on, Phil put this on our desk at lunchtime, right?
Yes.
Phil, is the link that you sent me before, is that still active? The Zoom link? Okay.
Ben sent us a new something, 54.
What?
So that's what it is. Well, that's 9/17.
I'll send it. Top. 9/17, oh, it's from last week. There you go.
Sure.
We just sent it. Confused me.
Yeah, I don't know what.
Yeah, it's good.
Working on this one.
Right.
So you're gonna share your screen?
Yeah, I am. I'm just logging on.
Well, good news while we're waiting. I saw Robbins this morning.
4 of them.
Robin's what?
Robins, the
Oh,
birds.
Robin. Robin Shies, what'd you see?
But on the other hand, I wrote home and said this, and John responds, maybe your illness is causing you to be delusional about Robbins.
Oh, he-
Well, it means the little groundhog may be superseded by the.
No, I heard some birds out the other
Yeah,
morning too.
no, I saw 4 pairs
Let's
of
see how far we can
Robbins
get in 18 minutes, eh?
flying around. Okay, it's all yours.
We
Ben.
actually have 8.
Okay, right to it. For the record, Ben Novogratski from the Office of Legislative Counsel. Before the committee is a draft of a memo to House Appropriations, recommending certain fiscal year 2026 budget items. So the letter reads that this committee has reviewed the proposed fiscal year 2026 budget and supports the following proposals and recommendations. The first ones concern DOC. Now, some of these section numbers may change after consulting with JFO, but that's kind of
Whatever.
stylistic than anything. But in current B 1100I, the committee would support appropriating $200,000 from the general fund to DOC to retain a consultant and develop an implementation plan to transition Northeast Correctional Complex, which may include the Caledonia County Work Camp to a treatment facility
for incarcerated Vermonters. However, such an appropriation is subject to DOC submitting a written report to Justice Oversight concerning the consultant's findings and recommendations related to transitioning either the complex or the work camp to a treatment-focused facility. The report is due on December 1st of this year and must contain the following: the detailed transition plan, expected outcomes and measures of success, an assessment of how transitioning either the complex or the work camp to a treatment-focused facility aligns with best practices for residential treatment programs, and input from DOC's current medical providers, including analysis of how the program would impact the current contract.
So I have a question, just the way it's worded. However, such an appropriation is subject to DOC submitting a written report. We're saying, yes, we agree to the 200,000. The DOC goes out and retains a consultant and puts out an RFP. We don't have any jurisdiction over looking over that RFP.
Correct.
What we were looking at was the next step. They've come back with their RFP, and the report needs to, in that RFP that has gone out, and then the report back on how the program is envisioned to be carried through, needs to include a detailed transition plan, expected outcomes, assessment of how transitioning the facilities to a treatment facility, and input from the current medical provider. The legislature can't get into reviewing the RFP.
Correct.
What our intent was for the next phase, which is putting the treatment facility in place. Before that can take place, the legislature needs to weigh in as a result of the RFP. So we're just concerned the way the language is, such an appropriation is subject to.
Right. I mean, that's me paraphrasing legalese essentially, because there's a footnote that would reference the language that I've worked on for the big bill.
See Exhibit A for proposed language to include.
I haven't.
You haven't done that.
No, I've done it. That's what I sent to Phil and you a little bit before 2:00.
That's once before.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
That's
why I didn't.
And I could just share my screen on that now.
Confused.
So, I mean, so the way that this is going to work is that this is a letter that goes to House Appropriations indicating your approval or not of certain proposals. Then there's the actual language that would go into the big bill, of which I've drafted a portion of to give to JFO for them to put in. So while the legalistic big bill language isn't precisely reflected in the memo, I think it gets to the same goal. Because the way that this reads, the language reads is that you appropriate the $200,000, and then the next subdivision is on or before December 1st, GOC submits the written report to Justice Oversight with all the different points. So it's a dual requirement. You appropriate and you submit the report. It doesn't say anything about reviewing the RFP or anything like that. This is language that we reviewed, I think it was Friday.
Yep.
Just tweaked a little bit since then.
Chair, I'll make some copies of that. Ben did send that to me, and when I just scanned it, I didn't know that it was concerning with this hour, so I didn't make any copies.
So there's no way that could be interpreted that the legislature is looking in on the RFP.
I don't think so, but I can clarify it.
So
Sure.
the governor.
It's a memo too. It's not the law.
The governor's asking for $300,000. This only talks about 200. My understanding, what y'all wanted was you were comfortable with $200,000 to hire the consultant to help write the report and the study. And you were open potentially to the $100,000, but wanted to see what the report said. This doesn't talk about that $100,000 at all. And to me, it sounds like it makes the $200,000 subject to a written report, which we won't have because we won't have had the money. You kind of got it in the reverse order. So I think there's a couple of hitches here. One is, I think you need to separate the 200 and 100 if that's what you're wanting to do. We need to find a place where the 100 fits. And then I think the report you'll talk about, the subject to language relates to the 100,000, not the 200,000. But that was my understanding of what you want. The governor is asking you all for $300,000 to do this project.
So our thinking is that we really want to know what the treatment services are going to be and what that program really looks like before anything else is released.
Beyond the 200.
Beyond the 200. And the thinking is this would be done by December, by the time you go out with an RFP, and BAA is there. So that you would have a better idea what the program's gonna look like. It's gonna be more than 100,000 to implement this. And there may need to be some renovations at the facility as well. So then general fund BAA would be able to handle that next appropriations. So that's why we're silent on the 100,000.
Okay. And it's my read of this though, is the appropriation is subject to a report. We can't provide you the report without the appropriation. So it seems like.
We're getting, I'm just gonna cut in, I'm sorry, we're getting caught up on non-legal language, which I've already changed to reflect what the actual big bill language is gonna do. So not to cut it off at the pass, but we don't need to spend time on this.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
So are you referring to this here?
So that is what would go into the big bill as part of the first point under DOC.
So in FY 26, funds would be appropriated 200,000 to general fund to retain a consultant and develop an implementation plan to transition any of the following facilities or portions of the following facilities to a treatment-focused facility. And then it lists the two facilities. And then on or before December 1st, DOC would submit a written report to Justice Oversight concerning the consultant's findings and recommendations to the transitioning. And then the report would include ADC. So this is just a paragraph to indicate to Appropriations Committee what our recommend is. And then this is the language that you would submit to them to be included in the big bill.
Which I've already sent to JFA, so that they have it.
Thank you. So that's where it really clarifies the differences.
Yeah, I think that's a lot.
Okay, good. Let's keep going. So we're okay with one?
We're good.
Yeah.
Well, Department of DOC, there's more coming up.
Are you gonna speak to the committee's
Getting there.
non-support of the 100,000? Or leave it silent on that?
Well, the thinking is that come December 1st, when you submit the report in terms of the results of the RFP that went out there, we're gonna know more what the cost of implementing that treatment facility is. 100,000 isn't gonna do it.
Right, I understand.
And the
That
committee,
100,000 will not have been appropriated.
right, we know that.
But you've got the budget adjustment then.
You got the budget adjustments, you'll have a better idea of what the cost will be for implementing that program. We don't want to stop the program. We want to know what we're going to be funding. And we know 100,000 isn't going to do it. So instead of tying up 100,000 right off, let's put the 200,000, get the RFP out there, have that come back so we know what we're going to have to fund and do it through the general fund BAA. Because you're not going to get it started before January or February of next year. In reality. And the legislature would like to weigh in, some members of the committee that want to weigh in to know what this program's gonna look like before we say, here, here's 100,000 to do it. Is that fair? Is that what the committee was feeling? Jeez. Okay, let's continue then. I know we sound so good. Better than
We were doing so good.
You would give, you could start speaking.
Yeah, not really upset.
Okay, next.
Next page. Okay, so the next point is the committee supports using $1,060,000 from the federal government earmarks EOC in support of the provision of recovery coaching for incarcerated individuals by Recovery Partners of Vermont at the state's correctional facilities. Given the uncertainty of the availability of federal funds on or before October 1st, 2025, the committee requests that EOC report to JFC on the status of the federal earmarks.
I think there might be a little bit of confusion on this one, which I could try and help.
There's been confusion on this thing all the way around.
Okay, so this money's already out the door. This is money from FY 25 from the opioid settlement funds.
Right, but
So
we're looking
then-
forward to
and then we
FY
have a
26.
$1.88 million CDS also for FY 25 with Senator Welch, which is pending. And that is the one that's cut up. So that might maybe.
But that includes the $1,060,000.
No, that's separate. That money's already out the door.
I know, there's money that was put in general fund dollars for FY 25. $1,060,000 from the opioid settlement fund, right?
Last year.
Last year. That's already gone out the door.
Yes.
This is going forward.
Oh, this is for future.
Yeah.
This is going forward
As part
because,
of that 1.8.
because if you look at the recovery network, what they submitted, they're not asking for $1,060,000 for FY 26 because they're thinking there's going to be an earmark that goes to DOC to continue this funding. You're not aware of that?
I guess you're. Yeah, all I can speak to, I can't speak to the Recovery Partners of Vermont or what their budget asks are. I can only speak to the money that's gone out the door, which is BAA 500,000 last year, million last year in the budget bill, and then the request we have for Senator Welch's earmark for the coming year. But I don't know what the status of that may be.
Right, but based on our conversations, it seemed like that 1.88 million incorporated what this 1.06 covers now, but for moving forward.
Yes, it is around recovery coaching, but it is a totally separate process than the state.
No, we understand that, but we want to make sure, what Alice's concern is that if that earmark does come through, that at least we don't lose, that we're at least back to that zero, if you will, the 1.06, even if we don't get the 1.88. You know what I mean? That's what the intention is.
Okay.
Let me read to
We gotta
you.
go, I know we gotta go.
Let me read to you the document from Recovery Partners of Vermont. Okay? I can find it here. Skim through too quick. You'll be able, we'll get out there.
Isn't Kurt's today too?
No, Kurt's is Fridays. This is Don Turner's. This is here. This year, the Recovery Partners of Vermont is requesting some things. We are not currently requesting the renewal of the $1,060,000 for recovery coaches in FY 26 because the Department of Corrections has applied for a federal earmark for this program, and we anticipate receiving those federal funds. Is that part of the 188 million?
The 1.8 million is for correctional recovery coaching.
So they're anticipating 1,060,000. That
We'll get the
1.8
1.88, but
will
again.
cover this, but we're concerned that that earmark doesn't come through.
Safety valve. Yeah, and I can't speak to that.
That's what this language is about. We're concerned about that. So if that language, if the earmark doesn't come through, then because of the uncertainty of available funds on or before October 1st, the committee requests, we request the DOC report to Joint Fiscal Committee on the status of those federal earmarks.
Maybe also reach out to Senator Welch's team.
Just don't know what's possible.
It's not Senator Welch has control.
No, but we do get I got a regular update from them that they're still pending those earmarks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be pending probably for a long time. So we need to get on the floor, so we need to pick this up after the floor. So please come back in, and we're really gonna need DOC because it's talking about Wi-Fi. And it's talking about lungs. Pizza Park.
Oh, you're getting home
So
early.
you can stay in.
And I don't know if you've
You
got
can stay in the Petri dish.
And
for a little while.
you come back after the.
He's gonna stay here.
Okay. Let's get to the floor.
No,
So let's go out for view two. We'll be back right after the floor.
Right after.
I gotta make some ice cream social.
Hang on, folks. We're on live.
I might need to rely on you a little bit from the stuff from last bill since I was